Yeah, so I'm not really a huge fan of black metal. Um, could care less for it. There's some bands that I like. I like Blast Nord. I don't know if that's how you pronounce it. Alcest, Dark Throne. Um, I can get with some of that, right? Over. I like both eras of Over. Um, and you know, not just because I've been told that I do Over better than Over, but I like Over. I think Over does Over better than Over. But So anyway, hats off to those dudes. I can dig it. But yeah, I toured with Wolves in the Throne Room back in the day, quite a bit. My original bass player for Megaton Leviathan, Chris Bug, went to school with those guys and was in bands with them before they formed Wolves in the Throne Room. And Chris will say this, but I don't think Wolves in the Throne Room will acknowledge or give any credit or heed to this. But Chris will say that he was their original bass player before they started, and he was going through all this personal stuff, and that's why it didn't happen, and and whatnot. And then Chris did end up playing bass for Wolves in the Throne Room for a tour or half a tour or something like that, and he got fired. Um, Chris didn't tell me that part, but needless to say, we I thought at the time, it was like 2007, 2008. That was a good opportunity for us to get our foot in the door with Sun. Uh, but I wasn't really aiming completely for that. It just seemed like that was kind of like maybe a likelihood, and our first shows that we played, we played Hall of the Woods in Olympia, and Nathan Weaver was there, and he was like, "Yo, yeah, let's do this." And so us, Megaton Leviathan, and Atriarch went out on the first few regional tours together with Wolves in the Throne Room, and Atriarch, I got a lot of respect for those guys, and I think they're still going. If you like Bauhaus and like doom metal, go check it out. I think they do a pretty good job at it. And but yeah. Anyway, man, like it really felt like things were kind of going in a direction, and we ended up getting an offer to put out a CD through a Spanish label called For Retro Coffin, which is Coffin, and I was like, oh, cool, man, I can dig this. And Eduardo was a really cool dude, seemed really motivated, and like we worked really well together on like um, just getting the album out there. We didn't hire a publicist or anything. He pressed 500 fucking CDs, and we sold every single one of them. And I think a lot of that was because we were playing shows with Wolves in the Throne Room and getting the name out there. And at the time, I was just getting interviews or reviews out, and like Julian Cope was doing reviews at the time, so he reviewed Water Wealth Hell on Earth, the first record that we put out as Megaton Leviathan, and then Repeating Patterns of Love cassette, and like that was a major boon too. And so we Aquarius Records gave us like Album of the Month, which was a big deal at the time. They were a San Francisco-based record store, and just they had a huge following. So those were really big feathers in the cap. And it looked like the future was bright. We were like, okay, we got to keep pushing. And so just because we had these shows with Wolves in the Throne Room, we also knew that we needed to do it on our own, right? And that was a hard pill to swallow, because we would play to these big crowds, and then like next thing you know, when we were on our own, we played to nobody. And as time went on, like it kind of got known that like we were associated like with Wolves in the Throne Room. And I think there was one point where some of like we started playing out separately, and some of our shows would be on the same night in the same town, and people would show up and be like, "Hey, we we could have gone to go see Wolves in the Throne Room, but we wanted to come and see you," and that meant a lot. It meant a lot, and I remember that. And yeah, but we still went out on tours with Wolves in the Throne Room in 2012 on the Celestial Lineage tour for those guys for Wolves in the Throne Room. Um, Chris negotiated terms to be direct support on the South portion of their U.S. tour, and they Wolves in the we were playing shows with Thou, like we just got a whole string of shows with Thou. We messed with Texas, and I like booked this whole loop in Texas to like I think we spent almost a month in Texas just so we can make these shows happen with Thou previously. And those guys were cool. Brian's cool. We there's a lot of hardships with this shit, like internally with the band, but we kept going. And so by the time that we got to the Celestial Lineage thing, like Thou was gonna do the dates in the north, and we were gonna do the dates in the south. And we did some shows with Wolves in the Throne Room and Thou, and it was cool, man. But at that time, we were playing as a two-piece band, like we were having lineup problems and whatnot, and like we were like, dude, Godflesh doesn't have a drummer, and we saw Wolf Serpent like a year or so previous to this, and we're like, they don't have a drummer, like let's cue up Chip and make it happen, so we got the backing tracks rocking. And so there was some stuff with that, and we were told that like, hey, Wolves in the Throne got this massive PA, they got 3 subs and all this stuff, and I'm like, fuck yeah, it's like Black Flag or Fugazi or something. And that's exactly what Nathan and Aaron were thinking. They wanted to have total control over this shit. And I think they were slowly finding their exit out of Southern Lord too. Like, I think they were outgrowing this thing. So they were going through some growing pains, and like, and so were we. And I just don't think we were properly matched at the time, and it was hard because like, they were selling Wolves in the Throne Room records at Hot Topic, which could be seen as a really good thing, but I think with that comes a fan base, and I think the underground they were losing favor with, like people from the underground were like, yeah, dude, it becomes popular at a certain point, and not in a good way. I think there's a certain way to navigate that, and I don't know. And it really seemed like they were flirting with the machine pretty heavy. And it felt like, to me, on that tour, we were treated more like slave labor than anything. And I think for me, I didn't have anything to do with negotiating the terms of that tour. So I think that Chris pitched it to me a certain way, and it was a different way in a lot of ways. And we got to play to some pretty big crowds. I think Wolves in the Throne Room got pissed off because we stole the show a few times. But at the end of the day, they're the ones who were raking it in at the merch table, right? Like, and I felt like I survived that shit. I understood what the rub was. Like, I was like, all right, yeah, we're the new guys. I get it. Like, and it was a hard sell to a lot of these people. But the people who got it loved it. And I still get comments to this day about what that experience was for some people who were there. And anyway, yeah, so I'm just kind of like, after all of that, like, I don't really have anything against Wolves in the Throne Room or Randall Dunn or any of this stuff. Like, we ended up getting on Seventh Rule, and I think by the end of that tour, we were really focused on finishing past 21 Beyond the Arctic Cell, and that album just didn't go the way either Chris or I had planned, and it ended up being something that I had to complete. And I did it begrudgingly. I wasn't really happy about any of that. We got, you know, we could have done more collaborations and done, someone else could have sang that Judas Priest cover other than me. But, the label Seventh Rule was like, hey, it sounds like Joy Division or something. Go with it. But I don't think anyone else heard it like that. And yeah, man. But we got some cool collaborations. Chris Force did a complete and total fucking like string section, and that was something that Chris Bug arranged, and I had nothing to do with. But shout out to Chris Force, because she's amazing, and it was an honor to have her write a piece and contribute it. I don't know what her and Chris's agreement were, but like it's so cool that she did it. And then Henry Barnes from Amps for Christ, Man is the Bastard, contributed tracks, some noise stuff. Like he had a Hammond organ that was fucking torn apart. They just it sounded really cool. And then it made a bunch of noise. And then he made an ATAR, like a sitar, and he played that shit. So that was some cool shit that happened on that album. But like, and that's when Morris Subit came into the picture. Chris quit, like we had some fights. But I think around that time, man, I just kind of got really bitter about black metal, because everyone had a black metal band. Like, black metal bands were getting signed. Relapse was signing everybody. And I just didn't want to have anything to do with any of it, I was still doing house shows out of my basement, and bands like The Body would play my basement. Stevie Floyd from Dark Castle had a project called Taurus with Ashley Spungen, and they ran in my basement for an entire month. So we'd have like guys like Asaph Decker and Billy Anderson and Jeff Whitehead. The list goes on. People just coming through my house, Graves at Sea, Nathan Mistrick. I lived with him for a minute, the singer from Graves at Sea in Loudoun. So yeah, like, not to drop names or anything, but things were happening back then, and I just, as much as I was ensconced in a part of that scene, I wasn't. It just felt like I wasn't. I was like kind of, like I was there, but I was always doing my own fucking thing, man. And a lot of bands went from Seventh Rule to Relapse Records, and the Relapse Records guys, like, were in my basement to see a lot of these guys play. Christian Mistress, that was another band that played my basement a couple of times, and they were on Relapse. So yeah, anyway, man, I think it just kind of felt like people weren't really about community. They were just about like what they can get. And outside of the people that I named, like there were just a lot of bad actors back in the day, it just made me really bitter towards black metal. It was just a lot. And I think over the years, I'm getting older. I don't care as much, I'm able to process this stuff, and whatever's going on with Wolves in the Throne Room, I look at what they're doing, and I'm like, man, they're Nathan's not going to respond to my emails anytime soon, but good on them, I guess. They got a job, they made a job of it, But I think for me, Megaton Leviathan isn't a job. It's something I do because I must. And I work through my shit with it. And I'm not gonna be a slave to the beast, That's it. All right. Well, anyway, I did some things. I'm gonna continue to do some things. All right, maybe I'll see you out there. Take it easy. That's all I got.